Jake Miller stood in the grand hall of the Celestian Palace, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. The walls around him glowed with a soft blue light that seemed to come from within the crystal structure itself. Everything here was beautiful in a way that made him feel out of place. He was just a soldier from Earth, wearing his dress uniform and hoping he wouldn't mess up this important diplomatic mission. The Celestians moved around him like living sculptures made of light and crystal. Their skin shimmered with colors that shifted between blue and purple, and they seemed to float more than walk. Jake had read all the briefing materials about them on the journey here, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. They were dying, though, all of them. A plague had been killing their species for generations, and now only a few thousand remained. Captain Lisa Chen, his commanding officer from the Earth vessel Valiant, stood beside him. She whispered without moving her lips much. "Remember, don't stare. They find it rude." Jake nodded slightly. He had been chosen for this mission because of his medical training, even though he was primarily a combat soldier. Earth wanted to help the Celestians, hoping to gain them as allies. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and friends were hard to find. The royal family entered the hall and everyone bowed. Jake copied the motion, bending at the waist as he had been taught. Emperor Kale moved slowly, his crystalline form dimmer than the others. Beside him walked Princess Liara, and Jake found himself staring despite the warning. She was the most beautiful being he had ever seen, her skin glowing with an inner light that reminded him of moonlight on water. The princess smiled at the gathered humans, and Jake felt his heart skip. But then he noticed something wrong. Her light flickered just for a moment, like a candle in the wind. None of the other Celestians seemed to notice, or perhaps they were pretending not to. The ceremony began with speeches about friendship between species and hope for the future. Jake tried to pay attention, but he kept watching the princess. Her light flickered again, stronger this time. She swayed slightly on her feet. Then everything happened fast. Princess Liara collapsed. Her crystalline body hit the floor with a sound like breaking glass, and the glow that had surrounded her began to fade. Celestian physicians rushed forward, their hands moving over her body in practiced motions. Jake pushed through the crowd without thinking, his medical training taking over. "Let me see her," he said, dropping to his knees beside the fallen princess. A Celestian physician hissed at him. "Stay back, human. You cannot help." But Jake was already checking her pulse, or what passed for a pulse in Celestian biology. The readings on his handheld medical scanner were bad. Her crystalline skin was turning gray, spreading from her chest outward like frost on a window. Cracks appeared along her arms and face. "She's dying," the head physician said quietly. "The plague has reached her. There is nothing we can do. She has hours, perhaps less." Emperor Kale fell to his knees beside his daughter, his own light dimming with grief. The entire hall fell silent except for the Emperor's quiet sobbing. Jake stared at his scanner, his mind racing. He had been studying Celestian biology for weeks during the journey here. There was something in his notes, something about their blood chemistry. "Your Majesty," Jake said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "I might be able to help." Every eye in the room turned to him. Captain Chen grabbed his arm. "Jake, don't make promises we can't keep." But Jake was already explaining, pulling up data on his scanner. Celestian blood carries energy through crystalline structures. Human blood carries oxygen through iron-based cells. Different systems, but the underlying chemistry has similarities. Our blood might be compatible enough to stabilize her, to buy time at least. The head physician shook his head. "Impossible. The mixing of species has never been done. Her body would reject it. She would die faster." "She's dying anyway," Jake said, louder than he intended. "What do we have to lose?" Emperor Kale looked up, tears making tracks down his crystalline face. "You would risk this? Give your blood to save her?" Jake met the Emperor's eyes. Yes, I would. The hall erupted in argument. Some Celestians called it madness, others an insult to their species. But the Emperor raised his hand for silence. He looked at his daughter, her light now barely visible, and then back at Jake. Do it, the Emperor said. If there is any chance, we must take it. The physicians moved quickly, setting up equipment that looked both ancient and advanced at the same time. They brought human medical supplies from the Valiant. Jake rolled up his sleeve as they prepared to connect him to the princess. He could feel his heart pounding, but his hands were steady. Captain Chen stood beside him. You're sure about this? Jake looked at Princess Liara, her beautiful form fading like a sunset. I'm sure. They inserted the needle into his arm, and he watched his blood flow through the transparent tubes. It looked so red against all the blue and crystal around him. The physicians connected the other end to the princess, using a device that hummed with power. The moment his blood entered her body, everything changed. The princess gasped, her back arching. Her skin began to glow again, but differently. Red mixed with blue, creating colors Jake had never seen before. The cracks in her skin started to close, and her crystalline form seemed to solidify, becoming stronger. But then Jake felt something strange. A warmth spread through his chest, and suddenly he could feel her fear, her pain, her surprise. It was like she was inside his mind. His vision blurred, and the last thing he saw before darkness took him was the princess opening her eyes, and they were glowing with mixed light, red and blue together. Jake woke up in a room filled with soft light. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then everything came rushing back. The princess, the blood transfusion, the strange feeling of connection. He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy and strange. A Celestian physician appeared beside his bed, moving with that floating grace they all had. Stay still, human. You have been unconscious for 3 days. 3 days. Jake's mind struggled to process that. The princess. Is she alive? The physician's expression was hard to read, but his light dimmed slightly. She lives, but she has changed. You both have. Before Jake could ask what that meant, he felt it. A pull, like a string attached to his heart, leading somewhere else in the palace. And with that pull came emotions that weren't his own. Confusion, curiosity, wonder. He knew somehow that these feelings belonged to Princess Liara. What's happening to me? Jake asked. The physician touched a crystal panel on the wall, and a screen appeared showing medical data. The transfusion did more than save her life. Your blood and hers have created a bond. We do not fully understand it yet, but you are connected now, mentally and emotionally. Jake stared at the data, not really understanding the Celestian symbols, but getting the basic idea. Connected? Like we can read each other's thoughts? Not thoughts, exactly. More like feelings and sensations. The connection grows stronger when you are close to each other. When you are far apart, both of you feel pain. That sounded impossible, but Jake could feel the truth of it. Even now, lying in this bed, he could sense her somewhere in the palace. She was awake. She was thinking about him. The realization made his face grow hot. I need to see her, Jake said, pushing himself up. This time, the physician didn't stop him. They led him through hallways that twisted and turned, all made of that same glowing crystal. Other Celestians stared as he passed, their lights flickering with what he guessed was curiosity, or maybe fear. He could feel the pull getting stronger with each step, until finally they stopped at a large door. The door opened, and there she was. Princess Liara stood by a window, looking out at the Celestian sky. But she looked different from before. Her skin still glowed, but now crimson-red mixed with the traditional blue, creating patterns that shifted and moved. She turned when he entered, and her eyes met his. They glowed with that same mixed light. Jake Miller, she said, and her voice was different too. Stronger, more solid somehow. The human who saved my life. Jake felt her emotions wash over him. Gratitude, curiosity, uncertainty, and something else he couldn't quite name. Your Majesty, I just did what anyone would do. She laughed, and the sound was like bells and thunder mixed together. No, what you did was unprecedented, dangerous, foolish, some would say. She walked toward him, and he noticed she moved differently now. Less floating, more purposeful. But you saved my entire species, not just me. I don't understand. Liara held up her hand, and he saw her skin was different. Still crystalline, but denser, more resilient. Your blood did more than heal me. It made me stronger. I can feel things I never felt before. Physical strength, endurance, and this connection between us. She touched her chest, right over where her heart would be. I can feel you, Jake. Your emotions, your presence. It's overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. Jake felt his own emotions tangling with hers, making it hard to tell what he felt versus what she felt. The physician said we're bonded, that we'll feel pain if we're separated. Yes. Her light dimmed slightly. I am sorry for that burden. You did not ask for this connection. You didn't ask to be dying, Jake pointed out. We both did what we had to do. She smiled, and he felt warmth spread through the bond between them. It was her happiness, mixing with his own. The sensation was strange, but not unpleasant. Over the next few days, Jake learned more about what had happened to them. Scientists from both Earth and Celestia studied them constantly, taking samples and running tests. They discovered that Liara could now eat human food as well as absorb energy from Celestian crystals. She was stronger than any Celestian had been in centuries, able to lift things that should have been impossible for her species. But the most important discovery was about Jake's blood. It contained something that fought the plague affecting all Celestians. The scientists called it an enzyme, a special protein that humans had developed during their evolution. It was common in human blood but completely absent in Celestian biology. This is why you are dying, Dr. Amy Wright from the Valiant explained to the Celestian Emperor. Your species engineered yourselves to be perfect centuries ago. You removed genetic diversity, eliminated what you saw as weaknesses, but that diversity was what kept you healthy. Without it, your biology became fragile. The plague is your own genetics breaking down. Emperor Kale looked old and tired. We were too proud. We thought we could improve on nature. But now we can fix it, Amy said. Human blood, combined with Celestian biology, creates a hybrid state that's immune to the plague. Princess Liara is proof. The Emperor looked at his daughter, standing beside Jake. They were holding hands, though neither had consciously decided to do it. The bond between them made physical contact feel natural, necessary even. What about the bonding? The Emperor asked. Will everyone who receives human blood become connected like they are? Amy shook her head. We don't think so. Their bond seems unique, possibly because the princess was so close to death when Jake gave his blood. The connection formed in extreme circumstances. Other transfusions might not create the same intensity of bond. But they would create some connection, Jake learned. Any Celestian who received human blood would gain some of the hybrid traits. Strength, resilience, immunity to the plague. And they would feel a connection to humans in general, though nothing like what he and Liara shared. Late that night, Jake stood on a balcony overlooking the Celestian city. The buildings glowed in the darkness, creating a landscape of light and shadow. Liara joined him, and they stood in comfortable silence. Are you afraid? She asked quietly. Of this bond between us? Jake thought about it. The connection was strange, yes, but it didn't feel wrong. No, he said finally. Are you? I should be, Liara admitted. Everything I was taught says this shouldn't be possible, that mixing species is wrong, but I feel more alive now than I ever did before. And when I'm near you, everything feels right. They stood together, two beings from different worlds connected by blood and circumstance, while around them the Celestian Empire prepared for a future neither species had imagined possible. The news of Princess Liara's transformation spread across the Celestian Empire like wildfire. Some called it a miracle, others called it an abomination. Jake found himself at the center of a political storm he didn't fully understand. He sat in a meeting room with Celestian nobles, human diplomats, and scientists from both species. The arguments had been going on for hours. Commander Vex, a high-ranking Celestian military officer, stood at one end of the table. His crystalline form was rigid with anger, his light pulsing a dark purple. "This is pollution of our bloodline," Vex declared, his voice sharp as breaking glass. "We are Celestians, pure and ancient. What you have done to our princess is a disgrace. She is no longer truly one of us." Jake felt Liara's anger through their bond before he saw her stand. She had been quiet until now, letting the others argue. But Vex's words had pushed her too far. "No longer one of you?" Liara's voice carried power that made everyone fall silent. "I am more Celestian than you know, Vex. I carry the hopes of our entire species in my veins. While you argue about purity, our people continue to die." Emperor Kyle raised his hand for calm. "We must focus on the facts. Dr. Wright, please explain what your research has revealed." Amy stood, displaying data on holographic screens that floated above the table. "The enzyme in human blood doesn't just fight the plague. It actively repairs the genetic damage that has built up in Celestian DNA over centuries. When combined with Celestian biology, it creates something stronger than either species alone." She pulled up images of Liara's cellular structure. Jake didn't understand all of it, but even he could see the difference. Her cells looked more complex, more stable than normal Celestian cells. Princess Liara now has enhanced physical strength, faster healing, and can survive in environments that would kill a normal Celestian. She can breathe different atmospheres, process different foods, and her lifespan has potentially been extended far beyond normal Celestian years. "How long could she live?" asked one of the nobles. Amy hesitated. "We're not certain. Human lifespans average around 90 years. Celestian lifespans before the plague were about 60 years. But Liara's hybrid biology might allow her to live for 150 years or more, maybe longer." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Jake felt Liara's surprise through their bond. She hadn't known that part either. He reached out and took her hand under the table, offering comfort. She squeezed back gratefully. "There is more," Amy continued. "We believe we can replicate this process. Willing humans can donate blood to willing Celestians. Not everyone will develop a bond as strong as Jake and Liara's, but everyone who undergoes the process will be cured of the plague and gain some hybrid benefits." "You want to turn us all into these mixed creatures?" Vex demanded. "To destroy what makes us Celestian?" "We want to save your species," Captain Chen said firmly. "You have maybe 5 years before your population drops below sustainable levels. This is your only chance." "Better to die pure than live corrupted," Vex said, and several nobles nodded in agreement. Jake couldn't stay silent anymore. "That's easy for you to say. You're not dying yet. But what about the children, the young Celestians who haven't even lived? Do they deserve to die for your pride?" Vex turned his cold gaze on Jake. "You are the source of this contamination, human. Perhaps if you were removed from the equation, the princess could be purified." The threat was clear. Jake felt Liara's fear and anger spike through their bond. She moved to stand in front of him protectively, her hybrid strength making her faster than anyone expected. "If you touch him, Vex, you touch me," Liara said, her voice deadly quiet. And I am much stronger than you now. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Emperor Kale stood slowly, his authority filling the space. Enough. There will be no threats in my presence. Vex, you forget yourself. But Vex didn't back down. With respect, Your Majesty, many share my concerns. The human contamination must be stopped before it spreads further. The meeting ended badly. As they left, Jake could feel Liara's worry through their bond. They walked through the palace gardens, a place of crystalline plants that chimed softly in the breeze. Vex is dangerous, Liara said. He has followers, nobles who agree with him. They would rather see our species die than accept help from humans. Can they really stop this? Jake asked. Your father is the Emperor. He can order the transfusion program to continue. My father is weak from the plague, Liara said sadly. And tradition is powerful among our people. If enough nobles oppose this, they could cause a civil war. Jake felt her despair and tried to send comfort back through their bond. It was getting easier to control the connection, to send specific emotions rather than just feeling each other's state. We won't let that happen. We've come too far. Over the next few weeks, the situation grew worse. Vex gathered more supporters, nobles who saw the human-Celestian bonding as a threat to their way of life. Meanwhile, sick Celestians began arriving at the palace, begging for the treatment that could save them. Emperor Kale approved a small pilot program, allowing 10 Celestians to volunteer for human blood transfusions. Jake watched as other humans from the Valiant gave their blood. The results were remarkable. Every Celestian who received human blood recovered from the plague. They gained strength and vitality, though none developed a bond as intense as what he and Liara shared. Some felt a vague connection to their human donors, a sense of friendship and understanding, but nothing like the deep soul link he and Liara experienced. One night, Jake woke from sleep with a start. Something was wrong. Through his bond with Liara, he felt her fear, sharp and sudden. He jumped from his bed and ran through the palace hallways, following the pull of their connection. He found her in her chambers, surrounded by guards. Captain Chen was there too, looking grim. What happened? Jake demanded. Assassination attempt, Chen said. Someone put poison in her evening meal, enough to kill a normal Celestian instantly. Jake felt his blood run cold. But she's okay? Liara nodded, and he felt her reassurance through their bond. The poison didn't work. My hybrid biology processed it differently. I felt sick for a moment. But then my body neutralized it. It was Vex, one of the guards said. We have proof. He hired the servant who prepared the meal. Emperor Kyle arrived, his light blazing with fury. Vex has gone too far. He will be arrested immediately. But when guards went to Vex's quarters, they found them empty. He had fled, and he had taken a sizable portion of the military with him. Messages came in from across the empire. Vex had declared that the Emperor was unfit to rule, that he had allowed humans to corrupt the Celestian bloodline. He claimed he was forming a pure Celestian government and called for all true Celestians to join him. The civil war they had feared was beginning. Jake stood with Liara on the palace balcony, watching ships leave the capital as nobles chose sides. Some stayed loyal to the Emperor. Others joined Vex's rebellion. He's going to try to kill me, Jake said quietly. If I'm dead, maybe the bonding program stops. Then we make sure you stay alive, Liara said fiercely. And we show them that hybrid strength is better than pure weakness. Through their bond, Jake felt her determination become his own. They would fight this. Together. The attack came at dawn. Vex's forces moved through the capital city like shadows, taking control of key buildings before most people realized what was happening. Jake woke to the sound of alarms and Liara's fear flooding through their bond. He grabbed his weapon and ran to the throne room where Emperor Kale was coordinating the defense. The Emperor looked older than ever, his light dim with illness and stress. "They've surrounded the palace," Captain Chen reported, studying tactical displays. "Vex has more support than we thought. Half the military has joined him." "How long can we hold?" the Emperor asked. "Maybe a day, maybe less. They have heavy weapons pointed at us. If they decide to attack in force, these walls won't stop them." Jake felt Liara arrive before he saw her. Their bond made them constantly aware of each other's location. She entered the throne room in armor that had been specially made for her new hybrid form. It gleamed with both metal and crystal. "Father, we need to evacuate you," Liara said. "Get you somewhere safe." But Emperor Kale shook his head. "If I run, Vex wins. The people need to see their emperor standing firm." A massive explosion rocked the palace. Dust and crystal shards rained down from the ceiling. Through the windows, Jake saw Vex's forces advancing, their weapons firing bursts of energy that tore through the palace defenses. "They're not waiting," Chen said grimly. "They're coming now." The next hours were chaos. Jake fought alongside Liara and the loyal palace guards, defending the throne room against wave after wave of attackers. He had been in combat before, but never anything like this. Liara was incredible. Her hybrid strength allowed her to move faster than any Celestian, hit harder, and keep fighting when others would have collapsed from exhaustion. Through their bond, they fought as one unit. Jake would sense where she was going and cover her. She would feel when he was in danger and pull him back. It was like they shared one mind in two bodies. But they were being pushed back. There were too many attackers, and the palace defenders were falling. Jake took a hit to his shoulder, the energy blast burning through his armor. Pain exploded through him, and he felt Liara's answering pain through their bond. She screamed his name and fought her way to his side. "I'm okay," he gasped, but they both knew that wasn't quite true. The wound was bad. Liara's hands glowed as she touched him, and Jake felt something strange. Energy flowed from her into him, and his wound began to close. Not completely, but enough that he could keep fighting. "How did you do that?" he asked in amazement. "I don't know," Liara said, looking at her hands in wonder. "I just felt your pain and wanted to heal you. The bond let me channel energy to you." They didn't have time to think about this new development. Vex's forces broke through the main doors, and suddenly the throne room was full of fighting. Jake saw Emperor Kale being dragged away by guards, trying to get him to safety. But Vex himself appeared, moving through the chaos like death itself. "Give up, princess," Vex called out. "Your father's reign is over. The age of purity begins now." "The age of extinction, you mean?" Liara shot back. "You're killing our entire species for your pride." "Better extinct and pure than alive and mongrel," Vex said. Jake raised his weapon, but Vex was fast. Energy blasts forced Jake to dive for cover. He rolled behind a fallen pillar, his shoulder screaming in pain despite Liara's healing. Through their bond, he felt her rage and fear. Then something else came through the bond. A memory. Not his own. It was old, from Liara's childhood, but the bond was showing it to both of them. It was a conversation between Celestian scientists, something she had overheard but not understood at the time. The plague wasn't natural. It had been caused deliberately. The realization hit them both at the same moment. Jake saw Liara's eyes widen as the memory became clear. Centuries ago, the Celestian leadership had decided their species needed to be improved. They had used genetic engineering to remove what they saw as flaws. They had eliminated diversity, made everyone the same, perfect, pure. But one scientist had warned them. He had said that genetic diversity was necessary for survival, that without it, their species would become vulnerable. The leadership had ignored him. They had called him a fool and proceeded with their plan. That scientist's name had been Vex's ancestor. "You knew," Liara said, her voice cutting through the battle. "Your family knew this would happen. Your ancestor tried to warn them and they didn't listen." Vex froze. Around them, the fighting slowed as people heard the princess speak. "The plague isn't a disease," Liara continued, her voice ringing out. "It's our own genetics breaking down. We did this to ourselves. Your ancestor tried to stop it, tried to preserve our genetic diversity. But the leadership wanted purity more than survival." Vex's light flickered, his emotions showing on his face. "My ancestor was shamed, cast out for speaking against perfection." "He was right," Jake said, stepping out from cover despite the danger. "Your people engineered yourselves into a corner. You removed all the genetic variation that would have let you adapt and survive. And now you're dying because of it." Amy appeared from one of the side passages carrying data tablets. "I found records in the palace archives. Everything they're saying is true. The genetic modification project from 500 years ago. The warnings that were ignored. It's all there." She displayed the data for everyone to see. Old documents, scientific reports, warnings from long-dead scientists. The truth was undeniable. The Celestians had caused their own plague through their pursuit of genetic perfection. Some of Vex's soldiers lowered their weapons. Jake could see doubt spreading through their ranks. They had been fighting to preserve Celestian purity, but now they were learning that purity was what was killing them. "This changes nothing," Vex said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "We are still Celestian. We should not need these humans to survive." "But we do," said one of Vex's own soldiers, a young warrior who looked sick with plague. "I'm dying. My sister is dying. My children are dying. If human blood can save us, why should we refuse it?" "Because we will lose what we are," Vex said desperately. "We'll lose what we are if we're all dead," the soldier replied. He set down his weapon and walked toward the palace defenders. "I volunteer for the bonding program. I want to live." Other soldiers began following him. One by one, they left Vex's side. Some were dying from the plague and wanted to be cured. Others were simply tired of fighting for a cause that made no sense. If their own pursuit of purity had caused the plague, then fighting to maintain that purity was just choosing death. Vex stood alone, his army melting away. Emperor Kyle, supported by guards, stepped forward. "It's over, Vex. Lay down your weapon. We can still save our people, all of them. Even you." For a long moment, Vex stood frozen. Then, slowly, his light dimmed to almost nothing. He dropped his weapon and fell to his knees. "I wanted to save us," he said quietly. "I wanted to preserve what we were." "What we were is gone," Liara said, not without compassion. "But what we can become might be better. Stronger. If we're brave enough to accept help." The palace fell silent except for the sounds of wounded being tended. The rebellion was over, but the real work was just beginning. 6 months after the failed rebellion, Jake stood in a newly built medical facility watching another successful bonding take place. A young Celestian woman named Kira was receiving blood from a human volunteer named Danny Cooper. It was the 107th successful transfusion. The process had become routine now. They had learned so much since that desperate first attempt with Liara. Now they could control the procedure, minimize the discomfort, and predict the results with reasonable accuracy. Not every bonding created a deep connection like his and Liara's, but every single one saved a life and made the Celestians stronger. Liara joined him at the observation window. Even after 6 months, Jake still felt a small thrill when she was near. Their bond had only grown stronger with time, but they had learned to manage it better. They could shield their thoughts when they needed privacy, share emotions when they wanted connection, and most importantly, they had learned to see each other as individuals, despite being linked. "Kira's doing well," Liara observed. "Her hybrid transformation is progressing faster than most." Danny's blood type seems particularly compatible with Celestian biology, Jake said, reading the medical displays. Amy thinks he might be a good candidate for future donations. They watched as Kira's crystalline skin began to glow with mixed colors, red and blue swirling together. She opened her eyes and smiled, flexing her fingers as she felt her new strength. Emperor Kale appeared behind them, moving quietly despite his size. He looked healthier now. He had been one of the early volunteers for the bonding program, receiving blood from Captain Chen herself. The transfusion had saved his life and given him years he wouldn't have had otherwise. "How many are waiting for treatment now?" the Emperor asked. "About 3,000, Jake replied. "We're limited by the number of human volunteers we have. Earth is sending more ships with medical personnel, but it will take time." "Time we now have," the Emperor said with satisfaction. "Thanks to you and my daughter." The political situation had stabilized. Vex had been pardoned and now worked with the bonding program, using his influence to convince skeptics that the hybrid transformation was necessary. He had even undergone the procedure himself, bonding with a human engineer named Kate Murphy. The experience had changed him. He was no longer the rigid believer in purity he had been. Now he understood that survival mattered more than pride. Not everyone had accepted the changes. A small group of Celestians still refused the bonding program, preferring to die as they called it naturally, rather than accept human help. The Emperor let them make that choice. Forcing people would have created more problems than it solved. But the vast majority had embraced the new reality. Hybrid Celestians were becoming common across the Empire. They filled positions in the military, the government, the sciences. Some were forming relationships with their human donors, friendships that crossed species lines. A few, like Jake and Liara, had fallen in love. Jake and Liara had spent months figuring out what their relationship meant. The bond between them made certain things complicated. How much of what they felt was the bond, and how much was genuine? They had talked about it endlessly, examined their feelings from every angle, and finally decided it didn't matter. Bond or no bond, they wanted to be together. "We have a request from the Korean Empire," Amy said, joining them with a data tablet. "They're another dying species, similar situation to the Celestians. They want to know if human blood might work for them, too." Jake and Liara exchanged glances. This was something they had discussed might happen. "What do you think?" Liara asked him through their private mental connection. "I think we have to try," Jake replied the same way. "If we can help, we should." The Emperor considered the request seriously. This would change everything. If humanity can save not just us but other species as well, you would become the most valuable species in the galaxy, and the most threatened. Captain Chen nodded grimly. "We've already had inquiries from species who want to study humans, figure out what makes our biology so special. Not all of those inquiries have been friendly." "We'll need protection," Jake said. "And we'll need to be careful who we help. Not every species deserves saving." "That's a dangerous path," Liara warned. "Who are we to judge which species lives or dies?" "We're the ones with the cure," Jake said. "That gives us responsibility. We can't help everyone, and we shouldn't try to help those who would use our help to hurt others." It was a conversation that would continue for years. For now, they decided to help the Koreans and see what happened. If human blood worked for them like it worked for Celestians, it would prove that humanity had something unique to offer the galaxy. The day of the first Korean bonding, Jake stood with Liara before a joint assembly of Celestians and humans. They had been asked to speak about their experience, to explain what the bonding meant. "When I gave my blood to save Liara," Jake began, "I didn't think about politics or the future. I just saw someone dying and wanted to help. That's what humans do. We help." Liara continued. "And when I accepted Jake's blood, I didn't think about losing my identity or becoming less Celestian. I thought about living, about having a future. The bonding didn't make me less of who I was. It made me more. They stood together, holding hands, their mixed light visible to everyone watching. Jake felt Liara's emotions through their bond. Pride, hope, love. And he sent the same back to her. "We are proof that different species can become stronger together," Liara said. "That accepting help isn't weakness. That change isn't death. We are the first of a new generation. And we carry hope for everyone who has lost it." The assembly erupted in applause. Jake saw Celestians and humans standing together, cheering for a future that neither species had imagined possible just a year ago. Later, Jake and Liara walked through the memorial gardens that had been built to honor all those who had died from the plague before the cure was found. Thousands of names were carved into crystal monuments, glowing softly in the evening light. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked quietly. "The bond? Being tied to me forever?" Liara stopped walking and turned to face him. "Never. Do you?" "Never," Jake said honestly. "Though I wonder sometimes what our lives would have been like if we had met under normal circumstances. If there had been no plague, no desperate blood transfusion." "We probably never would have met at all," Liara pointed out. "Our species would have remained strangers. I would have died young from the plague, and you would have lived your life never knowing I existed." "Then I'm grateful for the plague," Jake said, then immediately felt guilty. "That sounds terrible." "I know what you mean," Liara said, touching his face gently. Her hybrid strength was carefully controlled, a light touch despite the power in her fingers. "Something good came from all that suffering. We came from it." They kissed as the twin suns set over the Celestian capital, casting red and blue light across the sky. Around them, a city full of hybrid Celestians went about their evening, living lives that should have been impossible. Children who should have died were playing in the streets. Families that should have ended were planning futures. And in medical facilities across the empire, more transfusions were taking place, more lives were being saved, more bonds were forming between species that had once been strangers. Jake felt Liara's thoughts drift to the Korean volunteers who would arrive tomorrow, another species seeking humanity's help, another chance to prove that life was worth more than purity or pride. "Are you ready for this?" Liara asked. "For humanity to become the saviors of the galaxy?" "No," Jake admitted. "But when has being ready ever stopped us from trying?" Liara laughed, and the sound echoed through their bond, warming him from the inside. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. Two individuals, two species, bonded by blood and choice into something new. Something unbelievable, something hopeful. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky, and somewhere out there, other dying species were looking up at those same stars, hoping for salvation. And humanity, once alone in the galaxy, now carried the hopes of entire civilizations in their veins. It was a heavy responsibility. But Jake looked at Liara, saw the strength in her hybrid form, felt the love flowing through their bond, and knew they could handle it. Together, they could handle anything.